Hey, I wanted to make a video for you about fun versus proving yourself in your grant proposals and what an impact this has, especially for people who are in sort of underrepresented groups, women or underrepresented groups, because I think this especially comes up in that context. So I was on uh, a group call, where we were looking at proposals and ideas for proposals with this small group of clients that I work with in Grant Foundry Guild. And in that work, like it came up twice in the same call where somebody was struggling with clarifying their work on the page. And we would go through and sort of dig into the different layers. I use something called the problem and solution layers that we sort of develop and tease apart, and that can really help tease apart the scientific story that ultimately is going to go into the grant proposal. But I like to dig into the sort of scientific thinking behind it. Like, what is behind this? Like, what is the problem that you are solving? Okay, here's the solution. Well, what's the problem with that solution? And then usually you have multiple layers to that. So we were going through that. And often there was a lot of obfuscation in these proposals that I was seeing. And when we would really get to the heart of things, it's like, oh no, it's much simpler than that. There aren't all these layers. There's not all of this extra complexity. I mean, there still are layers, but it's much simpler and clearer, like a straight line path, problem solution to like what they are wanting to propose to do. And so we would sort of get there, and it's like, well, what prevented them from sort of getting there in the first place? Why has this taken so long to get to this point? And what came out in the conversations is there's often this element of trying to prove themselves to the reviewer, prove that you have the knowledge, prove that you have the worthiness, prove that the problem is important. And what's so interesting, and observing this both for clients, but also when I was writing my own proposals, both the earlier unsuccessful ones and most of the later ones that were successful, was this element of fun, of scientific curiosity and clarity. Recently, I heard a quote that writing is thinking. And honestly, I can't even remember where I heard that quote right now, but it was a great quote. Writing is thinking. And, so often we use the writing process, writing a proposal, to try to please a reviewer, to satisfy a reviewer. And that is the end goal of the writing, but the question is how we get to that end goal. And a lot of people try to start with the end, at the basically bring the end into the beginning, and that's not where it belongs, because I think really the beginning point of that pleasing the reviewer is us first having that clarity ourselves. And that clarity can help with our fun. Like, if we're doing this research and it's not to some extent fun, or maybe satisfying is a better word to us, then why even do it? We're not doing it for the reviewers, right? We're doing it for ourselves and for maybe people that we're solving this problem for. But ultimately, like, it should be fun and interesting to us to actually solve that problem, whatever that problem is, research problem we're working on. And it's really the initial stages of the writing are about using the writing to clarify the thinking about that problem, to make it better, clearer thinking, so that it's like, oh yeah, I think I can solve that, and to get more excited about it. And I can see in these clients and in other clients that I've worked with on their grant writing that when we clarify the ideas, their own enthusiasm increases. And that's essential. And it brings me back to something that, in a lot of my grant writing courses, like the Grant Dynamo, I've taught very early on in the course. Well, you've got to think about your community. Does this research fit the community? And the concern I have with that now, after seeing what people sometimes do with that, is that statement is still true. Like, we still have to pay attention to our reviewers and our program officers. All of those people are very important. And we have to make sure that what we're writing is going to fit for them. But if people start too early with that, they lose all of this fun and this clarification that goes into writing what is a compelling proposal. One of the clients I worked with today actually, had a very limited time frame for a particular thing that that person submitted, and so just sort of wrote something quickly and sort of for fun, and they made it through the first round of review, like where only 1 in 10 were picked, and they were picked for this. And this person was like surprised, like, why did that work, but these ones that I've slaved over haven't worked as well? And the answer is in exactly what I'm getting at. That one, there was lower self pressure to prove themselves because there just wasn't time to do that. And I looked at it and it was pretty well written, fortunately. So, and this person is a pretty good writer, like naturally, and so doesn't have to work at the writing. They just have to get out of their own way and actually enunciate the story. And and so this comes back to, especially for women, for underrepresented groups doing research, I think there's this extra internal pressure that we feel often to like prove ourselves. We've got to prove ourselves worthy because, we're being scrutinized and there's this implicit bias in the system and so on. All of that stuff may be true, that we are being scrutinized and there is implicit bias and all that stuff. Yes, may be true. But the problem is when we then take that and say, okay, as a result, I have to like be like Sisyphus or whatever, metaphor you like, pushing that boulder up the hill, and I have to do all this extra work to prove myself compared to my other colleagues who don't have to do that, that it actually bogs down the thinking, it bogs down the writing, it makes it less fun, and that slows down the progress, and that actually makes a less compelling proposal in the end. So it's this kind of bizarre catch-22. And, the point I made to the clients today, in this this is a general point, I made it specifically in their context, is that we have to still find the fun, find our own clarity first. That is essential. And if we don't start there, then we have no foundation to stand on with our writing that ultimately has to satisfy the reviewers and the funders. So it's almost like we need to proceed in two modes. One, which is finding the scientific clarity and the scientific fun and the scientific awesomeness, and realizing that that doesn't come from just like our thinking about it, that actually the writing is thinking, like to sit down and start writing it out. That will help us clarify that and make that science better for ourselves, not for the reviewer, for ourselves, for our own progress. And only once we've done that, then we're ready to say, okay, now I've got clarity for myself and I'm excited, I'm enthusiastic about this. Now, how can I make sure that that also fits the reviewers without watering it down too much? And in most cases, you can find a way to do that. In some cases, maybe it's too leading edge or maybe it's whatever, and it's not actually going to be a fit for that community. And then you might have to find alternative avenues for getting that work funded. But I'll tell you, like people that I know who try to pursue grants purely from a standpoint of like, oh, I just need to get the funding, that always leads to a trail of sort of misery. And this idea of proving yourself is never ends up in fun, interesting grant proposals. The best ones always have that element at their core. So that's the message for today. I hope you found it helpful, and I will have more for you in the future. And if you are interested in working in an intensive environment, we have the Grant Foundry program, and it's coming up soon. So you might want to get on the waiting list. I'll try to post the link here, or you can just go to grantfoundry.com and the information will be there. All right. See you later.